Oh my, small fry. Hello, everybody, as I tighten the microphone here, and welcome to Studio Remote, the uh, Twitch streaming service brought to you by Columbia University Libraries, specifically the Digital Scholarship Group, I think we are, and Research Data Services, which is a team that makes up part of Digital Scholarship, that makes up part of the Columbia University Libraries, that makes up part of Columbia University, that makes part of the city of New York, etc. We are here, so for the moment it's just me, Moacir P. Dessa Pereira. I'm the research data librarian at Columbia University Libraries. My host will be joining me presently, I hope, and that would be Alex Hill, the digital scholarship librarian. And I and slash we will be continuing the work that we have been doing since last fall on building a digital humanities project that helps describe or represent the lives of about 200 enslaved persons at the Rose Hall plantation in Jamaica. So Alex has arrived on the call. He claims that he cannot hear me. So I will be changing something here to make it so that he can hear me. There we go. Now he can hear me. And in the meantime, you have always been able to hear me, dear viewers of this stream. So let me bring him aboard once his camera is all set up and his lower third graphic appears, and then we'll be able to start the show in earnest. Ta-da! It's here. Alex,
Oh, I'm infinite.
you are infinite. What did I do wrong here?
I don't know, but I'm infinite.
This is there's a lot of infinity going on here.
You're kind of infinite too to the side if you like, but it's hard to because you're tiny in the bottom right. So this is like tiny infinite. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. The Zoom was in gallery mode, not speaker mode.
Uh,
So that was the problem.
Hi
Perhaps,
everybody. Sorry, I was
perhaps,
taking a course. I was teaching a
perhaps
course on
people
psychology.
want to see us in our infinitude.
That has a word, doesn't it? It's called when the screen does that. Hmm.
What What's wrong with infinity?
Infinity is my favorite word. Yeah,
That
especially
sounds about right.
the infinity stones are fantastic.
Yeah. What's an infinity stone?
I'm embarrassed that you have to ask that.
Maybe I remember, or just call it something different because I didn't grow up where you grew up.
That's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Is the Five Stones.
Oh, yeah. From the Infinity Gauntlet. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thanos, etc.
yeah. It's like as I'm saying, like I'm embarrassed for my generation. Like, and I have to go and apologize to the millennials and the Gen Z after this display.
Well, I can tell you that the that all came out of the Crisis of Infinite Earths series, right? And I read that for the first and only time probably about 6 or 7 years ago. So,
You didn't redeem yourself since you at least read it. I never read it.
yeah. Well, I thought I had to. I somehow convinced myself that maybe I should be familiar with the previous IP before going to see a blockbuster. Um,
Good times.
I,
Did I miss anything or no?
you missed my introduction. I already presented you and your title, so you can skip that. You don't have to do any of that. And I started saying that, just the usual sort of thing about how, um, uh, well, actually, so I have a couple questions for you that
Sure.
are not completely directly related. Surprise to this project. Um, so
Shoot.
the first is so as I may have I have mentioned here before because I've even shown the website. I when I'm not working in the libraries, I volunteer some time um, at an art gallery, and the art gallery is in the process of uh, uh, this large project, and it was among the things that I do for the art gallery is I host a podcast for them, and I always say like blah blah blah, located at 70 John Street in Brooklyn. And what I'm getting at is because y'all are probably not terribly interested in this other life I lead, but what I am interested in is that we had a bunch of the artists who are presenting on who are being part of this group, part of this project. This project has 20 artists, 10 from the EU, 10 from New York, and we had a video thing that's on YouTube, etc., where everyone introduced themselves, and then they were paired in teams. That's one EU artist and one artist from New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the New York-based artists, not all, but many, included something like a land acknowledgement in when they were introducing themselves. So they would say something like, you know, hi, my name is blah blah, and I'm currently sheltering in place in the unceded lands of the Canarsie Lenape in so-called Brooklyn. You know, something along those lines. And I felt embarrassed, something like embarrassed, because nothing would have stopped me from saying in the script earlier something along the lines of, you know, this project is hosted by a gallery located at 70 John Street on the unceded lands of the Canarsie Lenape in so-called Brooklyn, New York. So now I want to like always say that. And earlier I was saying that RDS is part of Digital Scholarship, which is part of the Columbia University Libraries, which is part of Columbia University. And then I hesitated because I wanted to say, and ended up saying, which is part of New York City. But it's like a little bit, like I'm not sure how to talk about this sort of stuff. And I was wondering if you had any opinions on the matter.
On LandX?
Yeah.
Don't see anything wrong with them.
No, well, this isn't about right or wrong. This is about, you know, like neither you nor I make a strong effort to, or at least I've never heard you at a conference or something like that say like, hi, my name's Alex Heel. I'm coming to you live from the unceded lands of the Wappinger and Lenape, of the Wappinger Lenape in northern Manhattan.
But we
like,
are.
I'm not.
We are in those lands, and the
Correct.
unceded. We are in these unceded lands.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I think when things become a ritual for me, they lose their meaning. Like saying, like, what does St. Valentine's Day have to do with love, for example? It's just a weird thing about me. So I've never been one for rituals. I do believe it's important to continue to read, you know, indigenous scholarship, scholarship coming from indigenous studies and written by indigenous scholars, and also to keep track of what our peers in indigenous activism are doing.
Mm-hmm.
I have right now, for example, my dear friend Rupika Rizum is who is going to be with me next show. It's actually writing on land grabs, as she called them, universe. You know this.
Yeah, one of the biggest beneficiaries of taking land from indigenous peoples are the very public university, you know, the actual, you and I were listening to something on that on All Things Considered, actually, while we were doing the face shields project. You and I were listening to a story about that, about how land grant universities are often on land that had been taken from indigenous people and then just given to them, and then the universities don't use up all the land, but then are able to mine it or something like that and extract resources from the land, and the university gets rich. And it's, yeah. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So because she's writing a book now. Her second book is going to be on the history of activism, and especially as it tied to minority groups within integrated institutions. And it's a response to some of the recent turns in university studies. University studies is a very wide affair, and but it felt like
Wait, white or wide?
white.
White.
It's mostly white scholars who do this university studies. But anyways, there's this, I'm sure you heard of Kathleen Fitzpatrick's book on generous thinking, and she's a digital humanist, and there's this turn towards care and language of care, ethics of care that come from feminism and stuff like that. But it takes a particular valence when it comes from our white colleagues. And I think this book, if I'm understanding correctly where she's going with this, is that it's a response to this spate by showing how from Du Bois until the present, the sort of things that are being praised right now have always been praised by minority groups within predominantly white institutions. So you're going through Nora to Hurston Du Bois and all the way to the present, where minorities always had one foot in the community outside of the university and one foot in it. This is not something that minorities are discovering now. This is always was the mode in which our lives in the universities were marked in the 20th century, including the lives of famous academics of color in the 20th century. So public humanities was always a feature of the kind of life of minorities in PWI. I think this is the history that she is unearthing. And more or less threading together. And it is within that context that she got into really deep into this history of the land grants, which she calls the land grab universities. And she's not the only one. I mean, a bunch of people made that pun now. And this idea of how the modern university system comes to exist on top of the back, literally. And, through the bent backs of the labor of the people or the enslaved people that we're talking about in our project here, who helped build the buildings of many of these universities, but also from the metaphorical backs of the people whose land was stolen, for example, in order to build this research centers where they had anthropology departments talking about them, right? It's just hilarious. So they steal the land, kick them out, and then pretend to be, do scientific studies about the same people you just violated. So that kind of work, to me, is crucial right now in 2021, right? What I don't see is that work reflected in some of these ritualistic forms, even though I see elders within indigenous communities kind of asking for those acknowledgements. I've seen it with my own eyes of indigenous elders being thankful for the spate of acknowledgements. Well, I myself don't think.
But that's also kind of so what's interesting or so the way I see it in a way that so there are two kinds of things. So one is separating out the kind of halfway pro forma, like that you don't. It's not exactly a land acknowledgement in the sense of it's not ritualized in the way you say. Like, I've heard of, I've never witnessed one, I don't think, but I've heard of if before a conference, like you have an active involvement with elders, etc., where they talk about what this land, they talk about these sorts of things, and then something like, for example, you and I are involved in the XP Method group, and the experimental methods in in humanistic research group here at Columbia. The website is xpmethod.columbia.edu, and at the bottom there's something done. There is the short version of the land acknowledgement. It's just like, this isn't based in New York City. It's based in specifically like Wappinger and Lenape land, and then for me, like you're saying about something about how it becomes like pro forma or something, or that's how I'm hearing you, and ritualized in the sense of the acknowledgement per se starts to drift away. So to me, what it ends up being is, instead of thinking of it in terms of like an acknowledgement, like some kind of something along the lines of something like an apology, or something that involves this active effort of with elders and with the the indigenous local community to the degree that it can speak. Instead, it's a modification of how we use language. So what I mean by that is, and I can sort of talk about why I think this is an appropriate thing to talk about on this stream. So I never really thought about these sorts of things much until I started listening to the Red Nation podcast, and there it's maybe exclusively Indigenous scholars participate, and when they speak, their toponymic dictionary, their gazetteer, is very different from mine. Because when Nick Estes, for example, when he talks about being in New Mexico, he doesn't say that he's in New Mexico. He describes that place using different toponymies, right? And but he's not doing that in that's just it's just a modification of the language, right? It's not that whenever he starts an episode, or whenever he participates in an episode, that there has to be an active acknowledgement that what is about to happen is taking place on these unceded lands or something along those lines. He just calls it something different. And to me, that's a little bit like, the way we've adjusted, in our lifetimes, language in other ways. For example, 10 years ago, this project would not be about describing maybe a little bit longer than that, but at least for me, 10 years ago, I would not have thought to say that this project is about describing enslaved persons. 10 years ago, I would have said this project is about describing the lives of slaves. But I understand that, or I've intuited that there's, no one has straight up told me, why you should use one term instead of another. I've pieced it together. I've figured it out because I know how to do close reading. And, I didn't read an article that said to do this, but it's a linguistic change that I picked up. And I don't think that I'm performing a ritual when I now say enslaved person instead of slave. It's just a change in language that helps me refocus how I think about the actual people that I'm, these historical individuals that I'm undertaking this project to describe. And
that's interesting that you put it in those terms.
Because, well, let me finish, because then there's one more example. Is what we were very very, very, very careful about in the gallery was pronouns. And the video thing, when everybody introduced themselves, I introduced myself first. I said, my name is Monsieur, my pronouns are he, his, him, etc. And we kind of failed because people occasionally forgot, but most of the people participating, of the 22 people participating, the large proportion of them gave their pronouns, right? And to me, that is on the verge of becoming just a norm. Like, I did a workshop 2 days ago, and like, not even thinking about it, I said, "Hi, my name is Moisir. My pronouns are he, his, him." Um, so that's like a second example of this kind of thing. So instead of calling it New York City, or like the gallery in Brooklyn, calling it the unceded lands of the Canarsie Lenape, it's a shift in language. So, all right, your thoughts. That's what I had in mind.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. That I'm not gonna do that shift in language because I find it a little empty. The pronouns I find full. Slave and enslaved. I'm agnostic because half of the people I know in Black Studies say that calling enslaved is actually just doing more for the psyche of young people today than it is actually for the people who experience the legal status of slavery and who knew that was what they were fighting against, and who called each other slaves. So you have a debate in there in ethnic groups that I'm not part of, so are not integrally. So I am agnostic. Pronouns seem important to me because, and that's something I still need to do that linguistic shift so that it becomes second nature instead of something that I'm thinking about constantly. Like I'm still like learning a language, so I'm still like, how do you say door? You say door this way, right? So until it becomes second nature, I think it should. Because if we're going to have really break down the binary of gender, we have to make it a part of language itself so that it becomes second nature, that to all of us as human beings, that gender is fluid. It's fluid enough that language itself can't break it into two
But
sides.
but couldn't you say that's the exact opposite of what's going on in, like, pushing back against saying enslaved person instead of slave? Like,
No, not according to the arguments I heard, which are very solid. The thing is
I
that
mean, there are
enslaved,
solid
some
arguments
people
against.
today say enslaved because it offends their sensibilities. And some say it offends their sensibility to use enslaved because it is not historically accurate. So a
Well,
lot of the
then what
people,
about like unhoused instead of homeless?
oh, same thing, I imagine.
Yeah,
Unless homeless, a slave was a legal status. A slave
sure.
was a designation. I don't know if homeless is that has the same, suffers from the same thing. On house is cute because it actually calls attention to the agency, or it shifts the agency.
Well, that's how I read.
Not,
Again, like, I
yeah.
haven't read this in Black Studies like you have, but that's how I read the shift from slave to
I
enslaved,
can
is
see
that it's not.
the same shift, except if I don't know if homeless is a legal status or not. If homeless is a legal term, then and people were fighting against homelessness in the same way that people bled and fought in order to overcome slavery in
Mm-hmm,
the Haitian Revolution and in the Civil War in the United States and many other revolutions around the world,
mm-hmm.
in which people fought and bled in order to change their legal status. I don't think it's the same with homeless, or not yet. I think that revolution hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
It just reads differently to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I remain agnostic. At the same time, if somebody tells me that using the word slaves, you've seen me consistently use enslaved here, because the people who
Well,
are
me too.
most offended by it are the ones who insist we should use enslaved. The people who say we should use, the historians and colleagues who say we should use slave, don't seem to be offended if you use enslaved.
Ah, I see. So you shift language to, uh, so in that sense, you're shifting language in order to accommodate, um,
Why not?
a group. Well, exactly. So, like, you know, we've
I haven't
had.
seen that pressure with the land acts. Like I haven't seen people feel bad that you don't do a land act.
Well, that's the thing is that's what I was surprised about my reaction. This all happened yeah, last week actually. So it's very fresh in my head. Or 2 weeks ago maybe now. And it or on the 12th. So that's why it really struck me, because I did feel bad, because it would have been so easy, but maybe that's part of what you're pushing at here. Like it would have been like it's so easy for me to say on the unceded lands of the Canarsie Lenape instead of saying Brooklyn. It's very like I can program myself to never say Brooklyn again without any kind of difficulty. And this isn't because I'm being like trying to be conciliatory or something like that, because like you said, no one, we aren't in a state where people are offended, I don't think, that I refer to a place as Brooklyn, so that I should avoid using that word. On the other hand, it is important to me to keep in mind, like the way, so I like wrote something resembling a land act for the gallery, and what I write is that that this gallery is on lands that have hosted many different people, but were taken from the Canarsie Lenape. Because to me it's important to, and this is like my cancelable offense, that it's important to acknowledge that the land may have been taken from the Canarsie Lenape, but there have been other people who lived there too, before and since. So
I don't think the Lenape are the only ones who suffered on that.
that's what I mean. So that's why I think it's important to say that this land has hosted and welcomed many different kinds of people.
And while it is one of the most important events that has happened in the geographical area of the United States, a historical process is not even a one pinpointed event. One of the most important and defining historical process has been the uprooting and violation, destruction of indigenous people. It is certainly not the only defining process that has taken place on these here lands that we're all a part of. And this is why ritualizing it doesn't just it just doesn't. By ritual, I mean like repeating it almost automatically every time. I don't mind putting it on a website. That actually, because there's a lot of other stuff happening on the website and there's no particular order. But centering every speech that you do by opening with those words, it just doesn't sound right. It sounds both empty and over centering at the same time, if that makes any sense. The historical processes that we've experienced of many different peoples of the world that have come together on this continent are very complicated, and equally high on the importance of things that have happened around here is the kidnapping and enslavement. That is appropriate use of, that's a grammatical use of the word enslavement right there. And the enslavement of vast populations in the African continent, and indigenous people, and even white people that were enslaved.
Well, but I mean, and we can even talk about, in terms of like displacement from homelands, like what to say about the Dominican displacement from Morningside Heights.
Right, no, and that's the other thing. It keeps going, right? This violence and displacement keeps going all the way to the present, with new groups being displaced, new groups being destroyed. And this is the thing, that this is why it's important to, and actually, instead of people doing land acts, read the scholarship, see if you can build alliances with the activists to figure out ways in which you can actually help. Something that I find to be, for example, impossible, or at least very difficult at this moment, is a revolution that would overturn the United States of America and return the lands to the people from where it was stolen from 500 years ago, or where the process started 500 years ago. I just don't see that happening anytime soon. Neither do I see.
You got to follow the land back hashtag for that.
I just don't see it happening. But that doesn't mean that I'm not here to help if I can, because these are people who are suffering right now, and I can help in any way I can. There are all kinds of revolutions I just don't see happening. I don't see a black socialist revolution happening anytime soon. And you can cancel me if you want. I just don't see it. Where and when is it going to happen? Where is it going to happen? How is it going to succeed?
We need the boys back.
It doesn't have it. It would activate the white nationalist. If it's already feverish, it would actually boil over that fever into violence that is not clear who's going to win. So these are things I don't see happening. I don't see the overturning of the United States by an indigenous army and allies. I don't see a black socialist revolution happening. I don't see a workers' revolution happening anytime soon. None of these things I see as things that are going to happen in my lifetime. That doesn't mean I'm not here to help. So we find ways to help in productive ways by engaging with the scholars, by engaging with the activists, by finding out what are the needs, what are the things, the skills that I can bring to the table. So we've done work with, you and me have done work with immigrant communities coming from fleeing violence from Central America and Mexico, only to find more violence here. We've worked to try to see if we can help there by doing counter surveillance of the forces that are fighting against them. We've worked in relief work with people who have been displaced by a hurricane. We've done all kinds of different kinds of work that finds way to help. And in all of those times, we've also immersed ourselves as much as we possibly could in the scholarship. And in all of those work, we actually have been in touch with people on the ground. We were doing Puerto Rico. We were talking to the Red Cross down on the ground and activists and GIS people down in Puerto Rico. Like, we never met them before, but when we started doing it, right away we started. Look, the day that we start doing something to help out our brothers and sisters in the indigenous community, we will. We will indeed, we will steep ourselves in that scholarship. We already read people like Nick Estes, and we're starting to hear the winds of that scholarship in our world, right? We would deepen that connection. I find that stuff a lot more meaningful than figuring out whether we're gonna do a land DAC. That stuff becomes like a Valentine's Day card. I just don't see it. If you're gonna cancel me, let me know, please. I really enjoyed Twitter. It was those people watching. Don't cancel that. I really like it.
Well, you could be, yeah. So Jeremiah writes that the artists in the gallery could be the activists that we are talking about, so that their use of the language could be very genuine in their eyes. I mean, I don't think anybody is performing, or let me rephrase that. Like, a land acknowledgement must be, it's definitionally a performance, because it is an
it's a step, because it doesn't do anything else legally, militarily,
well, but that's
economically.
But but when I talk about it in the terms of the way like Nick Estes uses, the way he uses language, right? In the podcast, and his collaborators at the Red Nation podcast, like, the way they use language is not, it doesn't come off as a performance, because it just comes off as, they are like, I'm being almost like invited into their discussion, where they use their terminology for things, and it's up to me to then go do the work to better understand, or to the degree that I can understand, these sort of terminologies that they're using. And I think I've told you about this, but I haven't said it in public. Like, oftentimes the podcast will open with words I literally do not understand, and are in a language that I do not recognize, and that's fine. Like, this is, I'm participating in listening to the podcast because I'm interested in these kinds of issues, and like, in my own scholarly work that thinks about questions of transhumance and migration, and about the idea of this thing called America that people want to come to. Hearing people like Nick using a different kind of language to describe it is super valuable to me. And but it doesn't look like but it's not like a Valentine's Day card. It's very unself-conscious, I guess. And that's kind of the thing, is like, at some point, hi, I'm Wasser, my pronouns are he, his, him, is going to be very unself-conscious. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting close. And just like I don't feel self-conscious or like I'm being, woke or something like that when I say we are working on this description of these 208 enslaved persons. Like it's second nature to me now. But saying the unceded lands of the Canarsie Lenape, that does feel like a performance, and I think that's going towards, that does feel extremely self-conscious, if only because it's much wordier, also. But
I'm gonna say Brooklyn, but you know what? I am. I think it's cool if you want to say the longer version of Brooklyn.
I mean, like,
it reminds me of like you go to Mumbai and as a foreigner you're like Mumbai, 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 and they're like, we call it Bombay. And
well, this is
Bombay is the name given by the colonizer, but that's literally what the people there tell you they prefer to be called.
It's a little bit more complicated than that.
That is a caricature version of it, but that is all for me to say. You call it as you will. I'm not gonna have to.
No,
thank you for coming to Woke Therapy. Right. I'm always here to listen to you. I hope today's session helped.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Heel. But we're not at time yet. I still have 20 minutes, so let me tell you about my mother.
I'm Lacanian, man.
Yeah.
This session is done when I say it's done.
No, but like I've also even tried to think about, I mean, like there are obviously very good, like you were talking about, like reading the scholarship and stuff, like these kinds of questions have resulted in this kind of work, and like thinking about these sorts of things that I never would have really thought about before. And like as I always say, if I'm writing a book, then the introduction of that book starts by talking about an extremely short-lived French colony in Florida in the 16th century, and just like trying to figure out how to talk about what was going on there has led me into trying to understand all kinds of aspects of these of like indigenous studies that I definitely never thought I'd be reading about 6 years ago, something like that. So that's good.
I believe in scholarship. Everybody in the every white person in the United States is reading. Well, not everybody. A percentage of the liberal side of the house is reading the anti-racist literature these days. And when I saw that trend coming up, that's one around the time when I signed up for the Slavery Archive book club. Because as I saw,
can you remind our viewers about what that is, please?
That is a book club where we come together every other 2 weeks or so with an author of a recent book of Black history, mostly dealing with the 16th century, 17th, 18th, or 19th. So we've hardly had any book that is centered in the 20th century. I don't think we've had. And hashtag Slavery Archive. The idea there is that instead of reading anti-racist book, how about we read Black history? It's harder because it's scholarship. It will always be harder than this kind of popular books about how to be anti-racist, which I personally find to be more unhelpful than helpful. I think I might be wrong. And I understand that it's more work to actually read scholars and to read historians, to read literary critics. I get it. Those books are slightly more difficult to read. But I think this kind of work that passes as anti-racist is suffers from a lot of, at least the most famous titles. So we don't have to repeat them here, but we know who these authors are. From a historicity, from the creation of contradictions, from a very superficial engagement with the actual people who study this. So for me, this is what I will always support. I will always support this kind of like you discovering this literature. Us starting, I mean, like we're not the only ones who discovering folks like Nick Estes. You know, like my encounter with the American indigenous culture came through to Sherman Alexie back in the day, who was recently canceled, I hear, for being a jerk macho guy. But
Yep.
was very eye-opening when I read him like 15, 20 years ago for me. After growing up as a kid in the Dominican Republic playing cowboys and Indians in the way that you imagine cowboys and Indians are played by a kid that grows up in the Dominican Republic. And very similar to the way the white kids would play it here. In any case, this is it. This is what I will always support. Read the scholarship. Don't try to talk to me about like I know we're gonna do these things at the beginning of conferences. I'm like, well, are we working with activists? Are we reading the scholarship? Are you really learning? Are we really learning about American history here, or
not? On the other hand, in trying to figure out if it's appropriate to say, like the amount of work that I did to figure out what it's appropriate to say about what Brooklyn is also something, though. A lot of people may just go to nativeland.ca, look at the map, and be like, "All right, done." I know what to say now. Whereas, like it rewards a more thorough look into your environment and into understanding the history of the lands that you walk. In terms of the migrations of many people.
Yes, learning the name of a group that existed there.
Yeah.
It's a very, 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 very beginner level engagement with the historical process that led to that group being displaced. And this is where those things usually stop there.
Yeah.
And that's why you won't see me evangelizing for these things.
Is that why you don't want Broadway renamed Wappinger Way?
No, go ahead and rename it. Please do.
That's going to be our lingering mark on the world.
And that's the other thing. I've always called people anything I want. I call my children by names that are not their legal names. And I have names for all of you in the audience. You may not know them, or you may. And because that's a very Dominican thing to do. And we have names for places that are not the legal names. So when we say Broadway being renamed the thing, what we mean is that this nation state acknowledges something as a given name. This is the same for persons. Persons are either the name that I call them, which is how I know them,
or what the government name.
I also listen to some people like Monsieur, for example, doesn't like you to call him Mo. Or if you call him just Monsieur de Sapereda, he will say P.
I'll just say that's my dad.
Yeah, that's your dad. That's what you say. Anyways, so I do respect, like how people want to be called.
Also, Dr. de Sapereda, I will say that's my dad. If
they insist. All right. Anyways, what are we here to just relax on a Friday, or are we here to do some work?
I mean, who's against relaxing? Because then. So I said I had two questions for you. So that was the first question.
We have apprentices who came here to learn a specific skill, not to do woke therapy with you.
This isn't woke therapy. These are important questions, and
to learn how to be woke, and I'm here to help you. I understand, but
no, this isn't about learning to be woke at all. I'm extremely unwoke.
My wokest friend. I know nobody woker than you.
No, I'm not. I'm a ball of cancellation. Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta silence these notifications. Give me a second. All right, go ahead. Can we go back to
Well, I had
Ro-
I had
All
one
right.
more question for you that has nothing to do with woke therapy,
All right, go ahead.
which well, I mean maybe it does. What do I know?
All right.
I don't know what woke therapy is. I'm not the Lacanian. But I wanted you to talk about your upcoming show.
How to find shit?
Are you
I just
saying
got
the
an email
title quickly so that
from
go ahead.
I just
Sorry.
got an email from finance that my intern has been approved for work.
Okay.
So starting next week, I'll be onboarding my intern who will help me with the production behind the scenes of the show, How to Find Shit. Will be the show will be
Are you
starring Ruby
going to
Turismo.
name your intern, or are you just going to hide their labor?
I don't know if he wants to be named.
I see.
Milan Terlunen is his name. He's the. But I haven't had the conversation about how much exposure does he want in this or that. He's definitely going to be credited on the thing. Um, but anyways, Milan will start working next week, and he'll help me put together the sort of narrative arcs of each episode. That one is going to be a lot more structured than this. There's going to be a lot less room for spontaneous conversations about Linux. So there will be a lot more staying in the theme. There will be themes. It won't be a project-based thing. So it'll be very different because every episode is just going to have a different theme. And that theme can be explored from different ways. Sometimes it's going to be a workshop. Sometimes it's going to be guests just talking generally about the theme.
Can you give an example of a theme, or is it going to just
Today
be like,
I was just coordinating the team. And one of the episodes I want to do in season 1 that I have planned is like people who have scholars who have worked with manuscripts or documents that haven't received much exposure or considered lost or unknown by people other than the archivists who carefully and lovingly curated them and have brought attention to these works either to the general public or to the scholarship around a given author or historical period.
So this is an episode about you?
I am one of those persons having myself, quote unquote, found, as the archivists hate for scholars to say, a major play by a major author of the 20th century. Necessaire's historical play on the Haitian Revolution, which he wrote during the Vichy occupation. And he asked Breton to delete it, but he didn't. Anyways, having found that myself, I find that that is something I can be a part of. But I'm also going to have Julia Gaffeld, who found the only existing copy of the Haitian Declaration of Independence in 2010. And that graduate student.
That's when it was found, quote unquote.
That's when it was found.
Not when it was written.
Haiti was the first country in the world to be founded by slaves and to declare universal emancipation, period, ever, in 1804.
Former slaves.
They were the first nation state to abolish slavery, people. For those of you who like to refer to it as the poorest nation in the hemisphere, it's a stupid phrase that crops up everywhere. You might want to start referring it to as the first nation to abolish slavery in the world.
And not Haiti la Maudite, like it was referred to in on the cover of Libération when I was living in France.
So yeah, exactly. And the other person is that graduate student here at Columbia that discovered Claude McKay novel that was not known. I actually don't remember the name of the graduate student. I have not read the novel but I remember the story. Huh?
The novel is great.
You read the novel?
Oh yeah.
It was good?
Dude, it's so up all of my alleys.
Really? It's Chicago? Is it Chicago based?
No, it's New York based. It's called Amicable with Pointed Teeth or something like that.
Do you remember the name of the graduate student? Because I'm about to write an email to this person, so I need to figure it out very sooner rather than later.
Amiable with Big Teeth. I mean, no, I don't remember the name of the graduate student, but I think they have a French last name,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure. But no, it's a great novel because um, it it McKay wrote it. Uh, McKay had a career that can be described as increasing disillusionment with the left and communism specifically. And this novel is written. It was written in the late 40s, I want to say, or right after, or in mid 40s, and so it was when McKay was like completely divorced. It's a farce.
Yeah.
Um, that but it does the sort of thing um, that Sinclair Lewis's It Can't Happen Here also does, which is like in its efforts to caricature and show how like ridiculous the communists are. It also, and this may be like wish casting from me, but vindicates them as well. So what you get in Amicable with Big Teeth is you really see how white communists were manipulating um, all different kinds of blacks in Harlem. As part of this whole thing, like the whole pretext is that a prince comes from Ethiopia. This is in the 30s, I guess, when to try and raise money. And there's this whole thing about how like uh, communists are exploiting and just like being like awful, et cetera, et cetera. And like I'm not here to um, justify like the idea of like these downtown New York communists taking advantage of blacks in Harlem. But on the other hand, which is something that you feel in Invisible Man also. Um,
If the shoe fits.
well, no. That like that's very much a part of the novel, but at the same time, like the the conclusions that the novel ends up with are like as awful, you know. So it's
I
like,
have to read it. Don't give me the
oh no, I
don't
I won't, because there are actually like
yeah.
straight up plot twists in it.
No spoilers. All right,
No
I'll
no
read it.
no
I'll read it.
spoilers,
I
no
haven't read
spoilers.
it. Obviously, I would read it I would read it for the show.
Yeah, it's a very fast read. It's not yeah. So I even taught it, and I feel really bad that I can't remember it more detail, because I like literally only taught it like 4 years
I'll read
ago.
it. I'll read it in preparation.
But but yeah,
So is
but
that clear more or less than what the show is going to be about? I hope so. I
well, I
mean,
mean, it's clear to me, but I mean, I always sort of knew, but I wanted to ask you to put it on wax for our viewership, etc.
yeah. We're gonna, and some of them are gonna be workshops like how to use advanced operators on Google, for example, something a skill that I don't think many researchers a series of techniques that I don't think many researchers are aware of, which make Google a lot more powerful than just simply typing words. Although that is already powerful, but there's like 2% of use cases where like that's not enough, and you might want to use some of these operators. Uh, uh, Season one will have 6 episodes, and we'll see if people like it and it's popular. I've had a bunch of people threatening to actually use it to teach graduate students at Princeton, Rutgers, UVA, and other places. So, like, if it actually becomes this popular thing that people are using in the classroom to prepare the first year, second year graduate students in order to be better at the technique of research, not in defining its goals or its the shape of the writing, which is a lot of people use the word research to speak of the writing itself and the forming of concepts and the forming of idea, but no, simply the techniques around finding shit in the archive or in the internet at large. In the archives or the internet, we're using the archive here in a very general sense as the cultural record or scholarly record. But
In a very English major sense, not a librarian sense.
yeah, not in the librarian sense, right? So Uh, so that if because this I've reached a lot of colleagues and faculty have reached out saying that that is a gap in graduate school programs, the techne side of the house, and we're not necessarily talking about digital humanities techniques here, right?
I mean, there's
We're
an
talking
eta at the
about
end of that word, so it's not techna.
techne just means
Techne.
you making fun of my accent now. We can
Yep.
go back to walk therapy. I tell you all everything that's wrong with.
No, I'm making fun of how you pronounce ancient Greek.
All right. Anyway, so I talked to Celia Naylor for
Okay.
1 hour on Monday. And I gotta bring you up to speed. If we weren't talking about land acts, I could have told you a wonderful conversation I had with Celia.
Well,
And she's
should we
gonna come and
break
be a part of the show.
should we break and then you tell us the story and then we do some work?
Okay, sounds good. I'm
All
gonna
right.
get something. All right. See you back in 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm back, and Alex is back too. Let's bring him back. All right. So you were teasing us, or you left us on a cliffhanger, which was that you spoke with Professor Celia Naylor, the uh, originator and the person who has made this show possible by asking us to help her tell the stories she wants to tell.
Yep, I did.
And
I talked to her on this. She was very happy and relieved that we were working on it. I told her that we were doing the show last fall,
mhm,
um, but I think she put it in a desk drawer in her mind and forgot about it.
or thought
So
we were just kidding or something.
yeah, so she was like, "Have you guys worked on the project?" And I was like, "Yes, every week for
You
two
can
hours."
you can watch it on YouTube,
I
although
know.
not recent episodes.
She saw an episode from back in the day. She said she likes that we are able to have a sense of humor. I told her that we try to balance the sense of humor of like just being two people just doing their everyday job with the sort of seriousness of the subject, and we have our reverent moments.
Hmm.
She really appreciated that. And anyways, I told her, listen, in like about 2 months from now, we'll probably be ready for you to come on the show. And after having looked at the results and reflected on them, and we would ask you to, talk with us. Just have a conversation, like an hour, 2 hour conversation with us about uh, the semifinal product, right? And
Right.
then after that conversation, then we can make some tweaks based on like what that conversation looks like. We're not gonna pre-plan it. I told her, listen, I think part of this, the charm of this show is that this is trying to replicate real life, including, for example, when we're working in real life scenarios and spend 40 minutes talking about LANAX.
We
Um,
weren't talking about land acts. We were talking about the way language has a role to play in your epistemology.
Correct.
And that's, something that you and I were both trained in.
Yeah, absolutely. The way that we speak changes the concepts we can understand, limits of the world we can build. So, absolutely. And that comes up in conversations while we're trying to build a project, even if you weren't watching us. So, the idea here is that Celia and us will not have like a behind the scenes conversation. We'll invite her fresh, same way we come fresh every week to continue working so that every aspect of this project is visible to our apprentices, audiences, peanut galleries, etc.
Fans.
So that we will have that conversation with her
Hmm.
without knowing what that conversation is going to look like
Great.
about the project. And then after that conversation, then as if it, because this is very typical to also of these kind of collaborations that we do in our kind of roles with for those of us who are those of you who are watching this and play similar roles in your universities, uh, you know that this is very typical of like where you bring in the you work when the faculty is not there, you work, and then you regroup with the faculty in a meeting. There's always this kind of like asking for you to change this and asking you to change that. What we hope is different though is that you'll see how we do it, that actually we consistently try to avoid the micromanagement of design in these conversations. So we try to steer faculty that we work with away from that kind of like asking us to change this little thing and to change this little thing. And we try to bring that conversation more into the intellectual import, into the interpretational realm.
Yeah.
This is part of our project management. This is part of our project design process. It's always to try to engage ourselves with the questions. For this project, for example, something that we actually did not do on camera, but that we did last year is we actually read her manuscript draft for her book that is coming out. Apparently, it's going to be very different. She told me on Monday that she has revised so much for the final revision.
Yeah, I mean, we did discuss it in the first episode, and even went like I went and did subsequent reading of one of the texts she cites.
Yeah. And to connect this to the subject, what we were talking about actually in the first hour, which this is why these things are not waste of times in the ways that we see them, because the way that we see the world and see our work and the way that we do our work, which happens to be also considered to be one of the fastest and most productive shops in our business, despite the fact that we do these kind of efforts to engage ourselves in the intellectual questions deeply. We actually had the student read Saidiya Hartman in her concepts of critical fabulation, which is
Kristen, the undergraduate
Kristen,
who
yeah.
helped,
So we
who
try
worked
to
create the original version of the site.
right. So we always try to create this this kind of we always go back to the scholarship on the projects, and that helps us. I think I'm actually convinced of this. That helps us build better projects. And this is also where we like to keep the conversation with the faculty. It does involve that extra effort of actually, for people in our role, you may be thinking, oh, but why should I read the essay of this person that I'm collaborating with? Or why should I read on this topic? They just asked me to build a website. I'm just going to build a website. I actually don't think anybody in our side of the house uses that language. I think it's more like, I'm going to use the methods, these methods in order to do this thing. But from conversations I've had with colleagues, is finding time to read the scholarship is not easy. Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to argue here is that it's worth it. And that I actually think if you take our word for it from a team that actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is known also for the ability to do things at a certain speed, that I think you will find it very refreshing to engage intellectually with the work. And I think you might even be able to go faster sometimes on some of these processes, especially if you use that engagement to drive the conversation away from the micromanagement of the project itself by faculty. Because if you don't build the relationship right, faculty will step into a position of micromanaging your design and functionality. And I'm speaking from hard experience, and also from the experience of many others in our profession.
And that micromanagement is not per se bad, or per se a distraction, or per se unwelcome, but what you're describing is in our efforts to read the scholarship, etc., what we are doing is we're modeling the fact that there is a critical language around the project as a whole that we need to become familiar with. And in so doing, the implication is that it's true for the other side too, which is to say that the faculty side of whatever project, but this includes any kind of researcher, like in any kind of collaborative environment, we have to understand, the other side has to understand that there is a critical language about the kinds of things that we are doing that they may not know about. And it's like being able to see that is not, or can be, difficult, because like who would think that there's a critical language of how to do visualizations? They're supposed to be like legible, like ipso facto legible. What's that?
Yeah, like these technologies that just work out of the box. You just put in your data and it's magical. Yeah.
Well, and that's very much like a Tufte, an Edward Tufte kind of approach to these sorts of things too, where the data, or has or have, I'm just saying that to tease you, the data have an apparent have a legibility or a legibility that makes that's inherent in it, and it's our goal to make that as legible as possible by stripping away all of the the filigrees and the folderol and whatever that obscure and mystify the data. But that's an extremely bad way of approaching the data. But it's one that's very popular with people who don't look at data critically, and even for people who consider themselves to be kind of data nerds. Because if you start going around saying, "Well, Edward Tufte's kind of full of it," your menchies are going to be wrecked, basically. That's a person after whom you don't go. And I imagine you're to the point where I was startled when I heard Joanna Drucker like straight up say like something along the line. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but something along the lines of like, Tati just is wrong about everything. So
I agree with my teacher.
yeah.
The more I see what the man's real opinions are, I'm like, no.
Yeah. So the our efforts to engage in the scholarship are a modeling of the kind of respect and relationship and the idea of this as a collaboration of sorts, or a collaborate not of sorts, but a collaboration like full stop. And the just like the professor is not doing something that's ipso facto obvious, because if they were, then they wouldn't be publishing a book. We would already know all that stuff. Similarly, the way that the data is presented, etc., is also like it can't be obvious. Like it has to be investigated and interrogated. And we've had this is a battle that you and I and our colleagues continue fighting on various different fronts, and like I'm here channeling some stuff I did earlier this week in workshops and things like that, but where it remains acute, where the conceptual grounding of, so you talked about techne earlier, and like that kind of that in and of itself has a ideology, has a critique, has a background, has a history, all of these sorts of things. And I mean, this clearly, and anyone who's read Foucault knows this, but somehow that kind of gets lost when people are just like, just tell me what tool to use,
The everyday struggle of the digital scholarship librarian types.
And research data librarians.
Nobody knows how hard it is.
No, it's not that it's not at all that it's hard, but it's I do think that these are like, as I'm, rats, like I really do want to get to coding, but as I spend more time in the world of the libraries, like I'm understanding these sorts of gaps more and more acutely, and I think that's fine.
No, yeah, no, and you've been here what, a couple of years in library land?
Yep.
Make yourself comfortable. There are insights to come at year 5, year 6. I'm still like on wrapping my head around these relationships, and what and how the system itself, where the system encourages them, where the system actually allows for some freedom for you to define relationships. Even when I'm at 9 years here, after almost a decade, I'm starting to even historicize these things. Like I remember, when Being Nice was uncritically acclaimed, and now we're changing this kind of thing.
What do
All
you,
right, let's go.
wait, Being Nice?
Oh yeah, that got canceled.
Well, is that Being Nice is now replaced with the Rhetoric and Ethics of Care?
Being Nice was seen as, kind of like a white way of silencing voices of dissent. It
Sure.
was a call for assimilation that was not received very well with a lot of POC librarians.
But
And also a phenomenon that actually gave in other parts of the culture, not only in libraries as institutions, but I've seen the movement against niceness in other institutions as well.
mm-hmm. Well, like Stephen Salida wrote about this, like the way that you know, how, what it means to lose your job because you're not nice.
Yeah. So apparently, there a
Because you
lot of
say
people of
bad
color in
words
this
on
country
Twitter.
relate to that.
What's that?
A lot of POCs relate to that.
Yeah.
I am super. I'm not sure that we're out in the clear yet. But if we're creating a world where it's okay to be a cranky old man, oh my god, what a relief, because that's all I ever wanted to be. Just to be a cranky old man, be left in peace, to be a cranky old man.
I
That's
mean,
all I ever asked. Not to fear for my job because I'm cranky in meetings. No, just let me be cranky. I ain't hurt nobody. Trust me at the end. I promise. Anyways, we'll see. We're gonna code here. Let's code, people. Let's
we'll
code.
see what the future has for the cranky of the world.
Yeah, that's right.
If,
Cranky old man unite.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you don't need to hear my opinions on crankiness. I think it's overrated. Everyone should be nice.
Aww.
My tears.
All right.
My
Bless
tears
you.
are making me cough.
Mm-hmm.
So, where did we end?
We solved the problem at the last minute. The clock on the was at like 10 seconds. It was 4th and 2, and you converted. It was a fake punt. You passed it. A screen pass to the linebacker, and he brought it home. That was thing of beauty. There it is. For those of you working in library land, those were American football references.
Carry ball. As or gridiron.
That we all watch that we're all fans of the Steelers as God ordained.
Why are you a Steelers fan?
Why aren't you? Is an important question.
My fandom in the Chicago Bears is the only fandom I carried from being born in Chicago to moving to Massachusetts. All my other fandoms were nurtured in Massachusetts.
Never looked good to keep your hometown team.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So basically, instead of changing my allegiance to the Patriots, I changed my allegiance to Bill Belichick because we went to the same high school, the Patriots coach, and then further, just now don't pay any attention at all to the NFL because I'm a American football abolitionist.
As long as you don't take the Steelers away, as long as the Steelers can still play on Sunday, I will join your movement.
Okay, so we built out and fixed the gradients here. So what we're looking at here is a description of a bunch of people by their age. And the purpler this wedge is, the younger they are in years. So when you're born, you're represented here as deep purple. And as you age, that purple becomes more of a magenta, becomes more of a red, more of an orange. So these people are sorted by their birth year. So we see these people are already in these yellows and greens because they are already rather advanced in age when the counting begins. So we imagine that the counting begins around here. This is 1817, 1818, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, et cetera, up to 1833.
Yep.
That's a good description.
Yeah, and what the graph does sort of quietly is actually groups older people towards the beginning of the radio and slowly advances through the radio by age, going to younger and younger people.
Yes, so yeah,
you will notice
that's what it means that it's sorted by birth year.
But yeah, and you will notice that some young people did not spend that much time there, and some young people spend their whole lives during that period there. So that last purple big line at the end of the where the radio touches the inner circle, it's a young person who was born there and lived for 20 years at least there. That line right there that the mouse is hovering over. After that, what we have is people who were born there later. So all of these weird ones at the top there, where it makes that funny shape, all of these people are born there, and that's why every single line begins with a solid purple in that part of the graph. And all these people were born there, and some of them went all the way to there. Some of them were separated from their families, obviously, or maybe died in infant
I think
an infant death.
I think that we use the terminology exit year in the project, but if I recall correctly, all of the exits are deaths except for one person who was transported. I think was.
We'll talk to. You see, I would prefer the language of death, but we'll talk to Celia to see what she thinks here, because I think it's I think I have the kind of this direct and honest relationship to reality where I prefer things to be named. You know.
Oh, no, that's perfectly fine. The only reason that we don't call it death year is because for many people their exit year is 1833, when
right,
slavery
when it's
was
not a death,
when
it's
slavery
like
was abolished,
yeah,
right? And or the one person who was transported away. But
yeah.
because those are variables that exist in the data set, it will be, not trivial, but okay, this is 1, 2, 3, 4.
We can create.
So Brianna left Rose Hall in 1826. We'll be able to say whether they were transported or whether they died in 1826. Like,
Well, we can
we'll
pay
be able
tribute
to say that.
to them maybe with a black line at the end of the at the end of the journey of the lifeline.
Sure.
We'll talk to Celia about that design detail. You just reminded me that she really, really loved that idea. That was the last time we met in person, where she wanted me to make sure that we turn this into that give curvatures to this thing to make it look like a rose or like a flower. The curvy so that it looks like a flower later. She really, really was happy about the idea. She felt it humanizes. It does a lot to humanize the graph, to actually add an artistic element where everything looks like a flower, and it's a flower connotes life.
That will be difficult.
Non-trivial, I understand, but we're math whizzes here. I told her it was math. I thought that in a painting on a canvas, it's just your control of a brush. Here, we have to figure out a mathematical formula.
Well, the hardest thing will be to not have overlap, I suspect.
No, it has to be a function.
But on the other hand, no, in the sense of not have the waves overlap each other.
That's what I'm saying. So it has to be a function that applies to every curve, so that nowhere will never be overlap. If we apply the function correctly, every single line will actually not overlap with the others. And well, I'll do a little. We can do research together too online. I mean, live, as we should.
Yeah,
Later.
yeah. So we have to remember to do that, but I think you will remember because you brought it up before, and like we've had this conversation that we're currently having. We had over a year ago, but we didn't do a Twitch show back then, so
yeah.
Complete with me being like, that's gonna be hard.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure. I'm convinced it's going to be hard because we're talking about a mathematical formula that applied consistently would yield non-overlapping lines. Figuring out what that formula will be does not sound like the easiest thing we've ever done.
Yeah, see, now I'm sort of figuring out how to do it in my head, and
We are young. We have young minds.
It may end up in less D3 in the project.
That's the part that's also going to be tricky since this is a blend of D3 and Ember. Because if it was just purely D3, I imagine it would have been easier.
Nope.
You don't think so?
Nope, because these wedges currently as drawn rely on the arc primitive that D3 builds. So effectively, so so you see this whole D thing here.
Yeah.
This is the like path meta language that describes so this is a point at 115 blah 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 and minus 199 blah blah blah, and then
Right.
these are all the descriptions of the arc and like with a degree or whatever that refer to this last wedge, the baby, this little baby wedge here, and this this content is generated by the um, by this arc function here. So, it says return blah, 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 blah. So what it returns is literally this string of information that we paste in here.
So we would want it to return a different string. Yeah, one that curves a little.
Yeah.
We'll jump from that bridge when the time comes. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We'll go deep on the Google on the SVGs and on the D3.
Right. My question, my curiosity is here. I don't know if you can really see this very clearly on your screen or on the stream. But these wedges, just these wedges here, seem to get way too skinny.
No, that's not visual. That's an optical illusion.
You think so?
Yeah, they're that skinny everywhere. They're exactly the same skinny.
Cause like,
why don't you keep on increasing the size of that thing? Let's see.
No, because it disappears.
Oh.
Because we had the
take a screenshot. Take
ridiculous...
a screenshot. Take a screenshot. All right, let's go deep on that screenshot. Move. You see how thin it is everywhere? That's funny. Some of them are actually very thin and some are not.
It's an optical illusion.
It is not an optical illusion. Okay. You live for those moments, don't you?
No, I wish it were an optical illusion. I wish it were an optical illusion because now this is something we have to solve.
Yeah, I don't know why, but the only thing that comes to mind is that actually it seems to privilege the end tip or that I would argue is the same thickness as every one of the end of the what I'm calling end is where farther away from the center. Beginning for me, I'm using the language. Oh no. What is it privileging? The gap?
My best guess is that it's the gap. That this is a function of how it, because there are 208 or however many of these wedges, and it's a function of how precisely the SVG can draw gaps that are like less than 1 radian in width.
So that's kind of like what the way LaTeX decides where to put lines on a PDF by doing this calculation of where everything would look the best, like black boxy.
No, I don't. I don't think that. No, I think so. One thing I have been looking into, and not for this, but one thing I was reading about earlier this week. So if you go to D3 examples these days, so if you go to see how people are doing D3 in these observable notebooks these days, you will see that.
Is that a Jupyter notebook?
No, this is an observable notebook.
What the heck is? Oh, that's new to me. Hold on, Google.
Dude, I'm not gonna say anything.
You mentioned them before.
I like literally sent you links to observable notebooks like 2 days ago.
Did I click on it?
That's up to you.
What? Nice. And apparently most people are using it for D3. Is that what I'm seeing here on my Google?
Well, it's by Mike. Observable notebooks are like JavaScript Jupyter notebooks,
Right.
and they were invented whatever by Mike Bostock, who's the person behind.
Oh, he did it himself. No wonder.
D3, yeah. So what I wanted to say is that Bostock in a lot of D3 examples has started using Canvas as opposed to SVG. So Canvas is what you use when you have many, 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 many items, because what Canvas does is it takes JavaScript and turns it into a picture, as opposed to building a complicated DOM element out of SVG, because SVG is just XML, right? And so an SVG graphic exists as DOM elements, which is why using Ember to draw SVGs is like so easy, because Ember is all about injecting stuff into the DOM and so on, as are many JavaScript frameworks. But it may be the case that in order to get this quote unquote pixel perfect, this should be drawn actually in Canvas. The problem with doing something on a canvas instead of an SVG, like not talking about the Ember compatibility, which is a different thing entirely that I would have to research, but the interactivity becomes a little bit more complex too, because you can't just add an event listener to this because this is a wedge is no longer something. What was that?
Something that is not obviously on the DOM.
Correct. Well, not obviously, but like literally isn't. It doesn't exist in the DOM.
No, it is in the DOM. It's just not. It's just part of the content, not part of. It's not an element.
It's not an element in the DOM. Correct. So what?
Content is in the DOM. It's just not easily addressable.
Yes. Yeah. And so this also brings up accessibility concerns and so on.
Let's keep it here, but let's do. And now that you mentioned this, and let's do a future project where we draw on canvas, because I want to learn. And I want to see that stuff in action.
Yeah, so D3 plays reasonably nicely with Canvas. And if I remember correctly, what it does is it builds a fake DOM inside Canvas. And so that's how you... D3 is all about fake DOMs, so...
Good times. I thought D3 ended up actually creating objects that are considered part of the normal DOM. What do you mean fake DOM?
Well, a regular D3 project always exists by beginning with binding data to things that don't yet exist in the DOM.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So
So that's how
DOM
it
is
uses
complete.
a quote unquote fake DOM. But when
Oh,
you're working in Canvas, and I may have all this wrong because like I literally learned it at like 4 o'clock in the morning 2 nights ago. When you are using D3 to build a canvas, then D3 is building a fake DOM in order to figure out what the canvas should look like.
nice. Smart.
The fake DOM is also central to how React works. React has a virtual DOM.
I'll call it fake DOM from now on, but I just, for me, I always thought about just injecting stuff into the
I
into a DOM frame.
Well, is a fake DOM the same thing as a power bottom, or is that going to get me
I,
canceled from?
that's what I'm saying. If anyways, let's not get too philosophical. Let's go back to the graph and I want to point out something. Can you maximize your screen there for a second?
I mean, this is as big as it'll get. What do you, or do you want
Okay,
me to
so
go
what I
back
wanted
to
to
the
point out
picture?
is that this is super okay, that we can live with this.
Okay.
Look at it. We can live with this. Literally very nice already.
So, did you show this to Professor Naylor, or just you guys just?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I show her this. This is where we are.
Did she like the
That's how
color?
the conversation about the curves started.
Did
She was worried about the thinness of the line. And I said, yeah, this is literally, there's no other way to do this without making the lines thin because of the amount of data we have. Not for the graph where we want to incorporate everybody. And she said, yes, I do want one graph, at least the main one. Even if we do more graphs later, she wants the main one to have everybody in together. And I thought that was important. And I think, yeah, I think that's going to be that. I think Monsieur would agree. This is important to keep everybody together, at least
That's
in one
me.
graph. Yeah. And then she did say that when we write an essay accompanying this, that she wanted some of those early graphs that do break it down a little bit more. That when you did that early analysis on the data, I think you were using regular Jupyter.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. The exploratory data analysis. I mean
yeah,
that.
she
Go ahead.
wants some of that to use in her essay, like age groups separated from, or like different nationalities separated, and this kind of stuff. I don't know if
Yeah,
we have that old Jupyter, but
we
not
don't.
hard to reconstruct.
No. Okay. So,
Do you have that? Do we? It's probably in your Google Colab somewhere, or is this pre Google Colab there?
it's just a regular Jupyter notebook, but it's I can almost guarantee you that it's in the old Rose Hall um,
Folder.
Git repo. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, so she said that she would want some of those for her essay that she wants to write. So
Or emails.
right.
Okay. Yeah. This is just Ember stuff. So yeah.
Okay. So anyways, so yeah, the thin lines will do, and I understand now that not all lines are the exact same thin, and that there were some opinions made by the software itself.
I mean that's what I suspect is that these are
Yeah,
opinions made by the software.
I think so because there was no logic. I mean, the bottom part is not the size of the top part everywhere, nor itself. I think it's just trying to evenly space them out as best as it possibly can, in an optimal evening out way.
Yeah. I
Or
think
the
it's
ARC package.
yeah. I
Because
think
this is the ARC package, right?
what?
This is the ARC.
It's just a function. Yeah. The arc
Oh,
function.
it's just a function.
Yeah. No,
It's
it's
not a
just
whole
yeah.
class full of stuff. Okay.
No, it's no, it's just a like a I said a primitive. I don't know if that's completely right, or even an appropriate term to use. But um, so D3 shape is a subset of D3 that lets us build things like arcs, pies, lines.
Right.
So
So
when
the
you talk
object.
about what's that?
Yeah. So so this is a function within the class D3 shape. Got it.
Uh huh. Yeah, it's a graphical primitive.
Got it. That's how they like to call it, graphical primitive.
Yeah. Like a first principle type thing.
That is one nice README page, I have to say. You just scroll up and down, like it puts us all to shame. Like half of my README still say coming soon, even though the website is published already. This one has really nice code samples with images, so like baller.
Well, this
Respect.
README is probably auto generated, I would guess. Oh, hey, look.
Nice. You see? I'm telling you. The editor of choice, my friend. The editor of choice.
But yeah, like I worked on a project called Turf where the READMEs were generated automatically based on how you used a library called JSDoc.
And you just write the comments inside the JavaScript itself.
Mm-hmm. And
Okay.
it builds out. Um, so like you may have seen this sort of thing. That's incorrect English and whatever. You know, people are people. Open image in new tab. That's what I wanted. So you may have seen this kind of these kinds of comments like this: a locator,
Yeah.
param, blah 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 blah. So this is like enforcing a kind of this is documenting the API of whatever you're writing, and then JSDoc can go in and pull out of this and create like straight up
Something that looks like that. Yeah.
right this API reference, because you know you have a description and then like here where you have like source, or where it says like what kinds of arguments it's expecting and like what the types are and so on. I mean, I don't know, but yeah,
Nice. I didn't know that.
something to look into in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, these readmes are like literally the documentation for D3. There isn't like a d3docs.com or something.
Very cool.
Yep. Okay, so do you want to, what's that?
It's 4:50. What can we do in 10 minutes?
So I was thinking of looking at the code that I used, that Kristen and I used to draw the scale. Like there used to be a little year scale on the old version of this.
Okay, see if we can copy and paste that one easily. Let's go.
Yeah. So let's.
Next week, let's start talking interaction.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So there are, if I go to projects and I go to the old Rose Hall, if you look at application and then wait. Axis. Okay. So this is the scale bar that we had at the bottom of the old version that gave the years. We can do that if you like.
Let's plug and play it. See if it works.
I mean, it's not going to work, but okay.
What are we? Oh, because it actually has some dynamic values in it. Did you just do cut?
No.
Oh.
So I'm going to put a new component here. Okay, so was that what it's called here? Yield scale bar? Correct. Okay, so now.
Hold on a second. I need to tell Ivan to lower down his volume. Give me a second. Yeah, we got him. The gamer headsets for Christmas, and now he doesn't realize the volume of his own voice when he's getting excited about it. He's playing this game, Sea of Thieves, and the pirates. They're finding treasure and stuff like that with his friends. Can get really, really loud in there. Exciting stuff.
Is
that buried treasure.
Is he getting killed by toxic players?
There's a lot. There's toxicity.
Are they turning into the toxic players?
There's toxicity, and he didn't. He asked me for permission not to mute the mic of other players when they're around him. I told him as long as he doesn't come out of that room cursing. I played the game. Members of the audience don't think that I will throw my son into a den of toxicity without testing it out myself. So what you can expect, a bunch of guys talking about like, "Hey, I crushed you," and this kind of stuff. You're a loser.
Go back to Fortnite.
Get out of my server. The server is mine.
Okay, so the there are two parts that make up the year scale bar. One is the actual bar itself, like that gets drawn like the little rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
So let me comment out this stuff because this is the actual gradient. And then we have this, which, let me comment this out, is so there's a reference here to something called range bar G. And what it's doing is it's appending a rectangle to it. And it's giving it the class bar, and it's giving it an ID, etc. And it's translating, and it's moving it around a little bit, and it's, doing some placements, etc.
Mm-hmm.
It's expecting a width of some sort, which who knows? So what we want to do here is we want to go and look at the companion. So how in the components, how in the community tree, we're totally not going to do this in time. We have this function here to create the arc. What's that?
Not happening in 3 minutes. I mean, what I recommend is that we comment this out and leave ourselves a comment for like, this is where we left off.
Okay.
Comment out the code that you just put in, though. Don't leave it.
Give me a second. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull in what the HTML looks like in the old version. So that's in app components. Nope. So this is a template. So we don't write JavaScript here. We write HTML /handlebars. Year scale bar. And then transform. Translate. Width divided by 4, let's just guess that's 150, and then 470. Who knows? And then just so we see something, let's do, oops.
Pickles is saying it's 5 o'clock. What time is it, Pickles?
Give me a second.
Masier's almost done. Masier's almost done. Come here. He's almost done. Look, he's almost done right there. You see him? That's him. Yeah. He's putting in the final comments.
What's up, Piccolo Mondo?
See, hi, Masier. Hi.
Oh, of course. Comment everything out. Ah!
You want some food? I'll give you some food. You want some food? You want a little food? You want a little dry food or wet food? Well, ask your mom if you had wet food already for in the afternoon. Here's some dry. I know what you want to do is for me to play, but I can't play right now. Matier is still high from his touchdown from last week that he decided to make a last minute play here.
It was a good attempt.
And it's telling you don't win every Sunday. You don't win every Sunday. Nope. That's the rule of
one does not win every Sunday. So for some reason it's not I can't see this rectangle here. I don't. Oh, it's too far down. Maybe.
Nope. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We will continue. There it is. We will continue. Thanks, Masir. We will continue next week. Let's say hi, everybody. Have a good weekend. I'll see you later, Monsieur.
Well, I can't say bye or anything now because I'm busy typing a commit message.
Yeah, type your commit message. But I gotta go because this guy's about to eat me alive.
He will not eat you alive. He will respect whatever's going on. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye. Here, I'll Alex is gone, so it'll just be my face for a little bit. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, have a great weekend and see you next week. Bye.